In this video, you'll finish building your homepage section by section in Webflow. Now, if you haven't seen the part 1 yet, I definitely recommend that you go check it out. We've covered the navigation, the hero, and the about sections. So you'll get way more out of this if you build from the beginning. So don't worry, I've linked the playlist in the description and I'll also link it somewhere above the screen. Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Olisa and I'm a web designer. I help entrepreneurs optimize their websites for better conversions. I've also been making videos on this channel about design, strategy, and no-code tools. So if you're trying to build something that works and looks good, then you're in the right place. Now, by the end of part 2, you'll have a fully structured homepage with a case study section, services, and a clean footer. So, ready to polish and publish? Let's jump right in. All right, so welcome back to our dashboard and just a quick recap of what we've done so far. So we've added the nav bar. We've also added the hero section, which is this title, a H1 text, 2 buttons, and the images as well. We've done the social proof here, and we also have the about us section. Now we are going to move forward and build out the rest of the homepage. And the next page that we're going to build out is the case studies section. So just like we've always been doing, we're going to click on the body and Command E for Mac and type Dave. Hit enter. We're going to name this case studies section, just so we have an idea of what section it is. So just name it. So hit enter. And then we're going to add another div within the case studies section. So Command E again and type div and call this CS wrapper. So case studies wrapper. All right, so what we're gonna do now is that we are going to turn this CS wrapper into a grid. So under layout where it says display, it's currently in block. We're just going to hit grid. We are going to have just 3 columns. We're also going to have 1 row. Like for the gap, we're going to give it a gap of 1 rem. So we're just going to go to card settings and just give it a 1 rem spacing. So now currently you can see that it is a little bit stacked to the about us. There's no spacing between the about and the case study section. So we're going to fix that later. But for now, to add the items that will be in the case study section, we need to add some sort of CMS to it. So we're going to build out our CMS. So we're going to hit this button here and it opens up this CMS platform. And we're going to click on create collection. So the collection name, we're going to call it case studies. So we're going to set out the fields that we want to have in the case study. So automatically it comes with the name field, the slug, and then we're going to add other fields. So since we already have the name, which is probably going to be the H1 text, we're going to build a description and picture and link. So we're going to click on add field and then we're going to select plain text. We're going to make it single line and we're just going to leave every other thing like this. And then we're going to put it, this field is required. And then we're going to call it description. Now we hit save. We're going to add another field, an image field this time around. So click on add field and then select image. And then we're going to call this case studies icon. That's what we're going to call this particular image. And then also we're going to make it required and save. We're going to add another plain text. This time I'm going to call it H3 header. And then also I'm going to leave it on single line and I'm going to click required and save this field. I'm going to add another plain text and call it except. Also I'm going to hit on required and save that. I'm also going to add an additional item and it will be the link. So I'm just going to call this collection URL. Also hit require and save. Now that I have the fields that I want to have in this particular collection, I am going to go ahead and click on create collection. So now I've created the collection. Now it's time to add items to this particular collection. So I'm just going to add 3 items to this collection. Now I already have all of those things in the files that you downloaded. So I'm just going to add the items in the collection. So I'm going to click on create new item. So the first collection is we're going to call it TV production company. For the description, we are going to, for the except basically not the description. We're going to call it a growing TV company. We're going to paste this here. And then for the URL, just going to copy this under slug, click on it, and then it's going to copy, and I'm going to paste it here. So this is basically the URL for this particular collection. And for the other fields, I'm going to paste the same things that I just pasted earlier. So the description, the header, just have this and create. So now you can see that I've created the first one. Now I'm going to fast forward this and create the rest of them. All right, so now I've created all of them, and what I'm now going to do is that I'm going to publish the site so that the status of this will change from draft to published. So I'm just going to come here and click on this select. Now select all of them and come to update items and click to queue to publish. So it's going to ask me this question and I'm going to queue them. So they're all queued for publishing. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come back, click on the same icon again, and then come back to this page. And then now I'm going to hit on publish and publish my website again so that the collections will be visible. Now I've published the website, so I'm going to go ahead and start adding the items to the case study section. So remember we made the case studies wrapper, the CS wrapper, we turned it into a grid. Now within this grid, we're going to set up a few items and before we can connect it to the CMS. So basically we're going to come under the CS wrapper, Command E, then add a div block. And now we're going to add other elements inside of this div block. So Command E again, and we're going to add the image, Command E again, and we are going to add a H3. So we're going to add a H3 text here. And then still on the div block, click on the div block, Command E again, we're going to add a paragraph, hit Command E as well, and add a link text. So now we have these items under this particular div block. What we're going to do now is that we are going to give them some sort of paddings and margins before we connect it to a CMS collection. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to come to the spacing and then hit on padding, and I'm going to give it a padding of about 1 rem. Also, I'm going to give the same padding on the other side for 1 rem. Give for the top as well a padding of 1 rem. Also do the same for the bottom margin as well. Give it a padding of 1 rem. Yeah, so it's 1 rem on all sides. So now you can see that there's some sort of room to breathe on this side and on this side. So now before I move further to add the CMS collections to this, I'm going to add some sort of spacing between this particular section and the about section. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to click on the about section. I'm going to give it a margin of 6 rem, which is the designated margin that we've always been giving for each section. So section padding, give it a margin of 6 rem. So now you can see that there's some sort of space here and we are going to continue the build. So I'm going to come back and click on case studies, add Command E, and then I'm going to type collection list. So you can see this collection list, click on it. Now it's going to add collection list to this section. So I'm just going to drag it right above just so it will be under this. And first of all, I have to connect this collection list to a collection item, to a CMS item. So I'm going to click on the settings here. You can see where it says source, and I'm going to connect it to case studies. That's just about what I'm going to do. So now you can see that it's listing out the case studies that we already added in the collection list prior. So what I'm going to do now is that I'm going to open this up, go all the way to the collection item, and then drag this CS wrapper under the collection item. Now you can see that it has collection items. Then you can see that we have 3 of the headings that I created prior. So what we're going to do now, you can see that this is showing in vertical mode. So what we're going to do is that we're going to come to where it says collection list and click on it. Now we're going to go to settings and we're going to come under layout. So we can see that we have layout for 2 columns, layout for 3 columns, layout for 4 columns, and layout for 6 columns. So we're going to select 3 columns. So what happens is that it basically aligns them to fit across. So, but you can still see that this text is somewhat, there's some sort of padding going on here, on the sides, and we're going to fix that later on. So first things first, we're going to come to the collection item. So we can see that there's some sort of padding going on here on the left and right. Now we don't want this. Click on this and set it to 0. Click on it again, set the right to 0 as well. Now we're going to come to the CS wrapper. Now, if you noticed when we're creating the grid, we added 3 columns and 1 row. So now we are going to reduce this to 1 column and 1 row. So now it aligns and the text and the imagery sort of fits within the box. So everything is fitting within the box. So now we're going to go ahead and connect all of these items to collection item that we created earlier. So we're going to click on the image and we're going to click on settings. So you can see this purple icon at the placeholder tag, and then just click on it and you will see the case studies icon. Tap on it and then automatically it changes. As you're making change on one, it's making change across all the collections that you have. So we're going to also go to the header and connect. Again, click on settings and then the text where you see the purple icon, connect it to the name, or we can connect it to the H3. So let's connect it to H3, and then you can see that the names that we put in before, all of them start popping out here. And then also we're going to connect the paragraph. Again, the settings, click on it, and the purple icon, click on it and connect it to descriptions. So now it's changing. For the text link, we are going to again click on the settings icon, and then where it says URL, you can see that get URL from case studies. We're going to select this. It opens up this field. It says select field. We're going to click on collection URL and we are good to go. So now what we're going to do now is that we are going to design these cards so that it sort of looks more like a card, and also edit this text so that they are properly aligned. But before we do that, we need to add some sort of header text for the collections, which was something that we should have done when we started building out the collections instead of just building the cards first. So I'm going to come back to case study section where it says case study section, Command E for a div, and I'm going to add a H2 text here. Now I'm going to drag it all the way up so that the collection list is under it. And then I'm going to click on case study section again, and then I'm going to add a paragraph. So Command E and then drag a paragraph in. Now this paragraph again added under heading 2. So for this particular heading, we are going to change the name of this heading and we're going to call it CS heading. So just call it CS heading. And for the paragraph, we're going to give it a class of CS paragraph. So that's just about it. And now I'm going to change the text here, paste this here, and also paste this here as well. So now it's starting to make a little bit of sense. It's just that we still have to give it some sort of paddings to left and right. Still on the case study section, we're going to click on padding and we are going to give it a padding of 1 rem on the left hand side, give it another container padding of 1 rem on the right hand side. Just to keep things organized, I'm going to add the second heading and the CS paragraph, the CS heading and the CS paragraph into their own divs so that we can properly align if we want to. So what I'm going to do is I'm still under the case study section. I'm going to type Command E, type div, drag this div all the way to the top. First of all, drag the H2 under the div, bring the CS paragraph under the div. So what happens now is that for the case study section, move it from under layout from block to flex. Now I'm going to set the direction downwards so everything goes downwards. And I'm going to set the gap to 1 rem. Now one thing that I'm going to do is that I am going to give this particular case study section a background color. So I'm going to click on case studies and I'm going to scroll down all the way down where it says backgrounds. I'm going to paste the color code that I want and hit enter, and then background color code changes. So this is currently what we are seeing. So I'm just going to change the texts and align align it to the brand colors and the brand fonts that we've been using all along. So for the case studies, that's the H2. So I'm gonna click on this and call it CS heading, and I'm going to go to where it says typography, and under the fonts I'm going to give it the H1 text, so I'm going to call it this. And for the weight, I'm just going to leave it like that. For the height, I'm going to give it 1 EM, and for the size, I am going to give it a size of 1.125. But this is very small, so I'm going to change it. So I'm going to change the size that I'm going to give to this to 2 rem. Let's see. So 2 rem is still a little bit small. Give it 3 rem, or maybe 2.5 rem. Yeah, this makes a lot of sense. And I'm going to click the paragraph as well and change the font to the font family that we are using for the paragraph. And I'm going to make it medium. I'm going to do the height to 1 EM, and I'm going to set this to the paragraph size that we already had for the website. And one thing I didn't do in the H1 is to change the color, so I'm just going to come here and change the color to gunmetal. Again, add the colors, the brand colors that we already have. And then for the paragraph, I'm going to do the same, switch it to battleship gray. So now that I have this, I'm also going to come to the inside the cards and also make the same text changes. So just click on the first one. Remember, when we edit the first one, every other thing is going to go along with it. So I'm going to edit this and give it a height of 1 EM, give it a color of gunmetal, and change the size. So I'm going to change the size to 1.75 rem. So I'm just going to give it a local size of 1.75 rem. Now this rather seems too large, so I'm just going to give it 1.5. Yeah, this makes a lot of sense for a card heading. So and then I'm going to click on the paragraph that comes along with it, and I'm going to give the paragraph a font family of Inter. I am going to change the height to 1 EM, change the colors to walnut brown. I'm going to leave the size at 0.875. So just leave it at 0.875 rem. And for the link, I'm going to change it again, give it the text for the paragraph, which is Inter, and I'm going to give it a height of 1 EM. Now I'm going to change the color. Instead of selecting the colors that I had earlier, I'm just going to paste an entirely different color. Make sure that the weight is set to bold, or rather black. I'm going to remove the decoration as well, and I'm going to change the text to learn more. Now inside this div block 2, inside this card, so I'm just going to change it from div block 2. I'm going to rename it to card. What I'm going to do is that I'm going to separate the image and these texts, and I'm going to do that with div. So I'm going to click on this card and Command E and add a div. Also duplicate this div, so it's 2 divs. Now I'm going to drag one div all the way to the top of the card and add the image inside the div. And then the second div, I'm going to bring it up and add the header, add the paragraph, and add the links. So now that I have these 2 divs, so what I'm going to do is that I'm going to click on the second div, go to layouts, and I'm going to turn this into a flex, point it direction downwards, and I'm going to give this a gap of 1 rem, or rather 1 rem is way too much for it, so I'm just going to manually give it 0.5 rem. So it has some sort of gap in between these 3 texts. The next thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to separate these cards and make them visible. Click on the CS wrapper. I'm going to change the background of this CS wrapper. So scroll all the way down to background where it says color. Click on the purple icon, and I'm going to change the background to white. So now that you notice that these items are, sort of stacked together, there's no spacing in between them. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to come and click on collection list. Now from collection item, click on collection list, and where it says layout, I'm going to turn it to flex. Now I'm going to leave it at a horizontal direction currently. So what I'm going to do is that where it says gap, I am going to give it a gap of 1 rem. So just give it a gap of 1 rem. Now we can see that there are gaps in between the two. So now we can differentiate in between the two of them. So also we notice that the cards are not the same height. So you can see like the TV production card and the National Prepared Food Distribution card are basically not the same. So you can see this is where this ends, and this is, stretched all the way down. So what we're going to do is that we're going to click on this CS wrapper and come to height and give it a height of 100%. Another thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that the edges of the cards are curved. So I'm going to scroll down and go all the way to borders where it says radius. I'm going to come here and give it a border radius. So click on the purple thing again, and under buttons you can see a radius of 0.5. So give it a radius of 0.5. So another thing that I'm going to do is that I'm going to, separate this case study section from this particular section. So right under case studies block, the first block that is containing the case studies and the text, I'm going to click on it and I'm going to give it a margin of 6 rem. Oh wait, 6 rem is way too much. I'm going to give it a margin of 3 rem. There's some sort of breathing room. And for the bottom padding, I'm going to give it a margin of 1 rem as well. Now we can see that this is coming on nicely. So, but for the image, it looks rather way too flat. So we are going to click on the image itself, also make it have its own borders. So scroll all the way down. When you click on one of the images, scroll all the way down to where it says borders and then select this solid line. Now they all have their own borders. I'm going to make this 0.125 rem. That's the width I'm going to give it, and I'm going to change the color to alabaster, and I'm going to give it a border radius of 0.5. It looks kind of like it's separated, right? So that's that for the case study section. So now we're going to move to the next section. Now for the next section is also going to be a card section, a card-based section. So basically it's more or less like repeating what we just did. So I'm going to fast forward this to create a CMS collection and create the cards and the div and the section, and go about and do all of that again. So now we are going to build the footer. So as always, hit the body, Command E, select a div, add a div block. Now we're going to give this a class name of footer, then Command E again, add another div block inside it and give it a class name of footer wrapper. Now for this footer wrapper, I am basically going to set it up to be 80% width. So I'm just going to come to the minimum width and give it 80%. And I'm also going to give it a height of 100%. So now inside this footer, I'm going to add more div blocks inside it. So Command E, select div, add it inside. Now this div block that I added inside, I'm going to duplicate it into 3 places. Now you can see the first div block, the second one, and the third one here. Now we're going to go to the second div block and we're going to make it flex, and we're going to keep the direction horizontal. Also, we're going to align it and click it space in between, and then I'm going to rename that particular div block and give it a CSS name of footer links. Now inside of this footer links, I am going to add 4 div blocks. So Command E, div, and add it inside. You can see that it's inside the middle, and I'm going to duplicate this into 3 more places. So Command D into 3 places. Go to the first div block, and for the first div block, I'm going to rename it to footer social. Inside the footer social, I'm going to add 2 more div blocks. Command E, add a div, and duplicate that div. So for the first div block, I'm going to term it logo, and for the second div block, I'm going to give it a CSS of social. Now inside the first div block, again inside it, I'm going to add an image. So Command E, type image, add an image, and then I'm going to select the image from the assets. Now I'm going to come to the footer social, make it a flex, leave it direction horizontal, make it space in between. Now I'm going to give it a padding of 1 rem each on both sides. I'm going to click on the purple icon and give it 1 rem on the left and also 1 rem on the right. Now for this logo, I'm going to select the first div block within the first footer social, and I'm going to align it to the center. I'm also going to select the social and also align it to the center center as well. Now I'm going to add a text in where it says social. So Command E and add a paragraph. Now I'm going to replace this text with text that I want it to be here, which is stay up to date with automation. And I'm going to remove the button padding. I am going to change the text. I'm going to change it and add the paragraph text that we have, which is enter, give it a height of 1 EM, and then give it the spacing of 0.125 rem, and also change the color, change it to walnut brown, and change the weight as well, and make sure it's on medium. Now I'm going to click on the same social div, add images as well, so Command E just to come after the text that I just put in with the stay up to date with some automation text. And I'm going to add 3 images, so I'm going to Command E, image, and this image I'm going to select the image that I already added from the assets, and you can see that this is the first social image, and I'm going to duplicate this into 3 places, so Command D into 3 places, and then I'm going to switch each of the images to the right icon. Alright, so now I've added the images, but you can see that it's kind of like stacked, and I want this to be beside this text. So what I'm going to do is click on the social div, come to where it says layout, and turn it into flex, and now you can see that it goes horizontally. So what I'm going to do now is that I'm going to add these images within a div block of its own, so that it's sort of like separate from this particular paragraph. So still under social, I'm going to do Command E, add a div block, and pull the div block under paragraph, and I'm going to add the images to this particular div block. Just drag it under the div block, and now they are under their own particular div block. So I'm going to click on social again, and I'm going to give it a gap of 1 rem, so it's a little bit separate from these icons. And then I'm going to come to the paragraph, click on the paragraph, and then come to where it says align on the right, and align it to the center. So that's that for the first div block within the footer wrapper. And then for the third div block, we're going to add the copyright. So click on the third div block and give it a class name of copyright. And within this copyright, we're going to add 2 more div blocks. So Command E and add a div, duplicate this div, come back to the copyright and turn it from block to flex. Make sure that you have space in between so it stretches out the screen. Now in the first div block, we are going to have the copyright text. So we're going to add a paragraph inside it. So Command E as well, and add a paragraph. So I'm just going to change the text on this paragraph. Now I'm going to, instead of designing the paragraph all over again, I am going to change it to previous paragraph that we already had. I'm going to change it to this particular paragraph, which is paragraph 5, and I am going to add another text here. So I'm going to click on the second div block and Command E and add another paragraph, and I'm going to paste the text here, and I'm going to also change this to paragraph 5 as well. Now you can see that for the footer menu, we have the first section of the footer menu and the last section of the footer menu together. Now what I'm going to do is that I am going to give them some sort of space so that this first part of the footer menu and the last part of the footer menu have some sort of like breathing space in between this. So I'm going to give them so click on the footer wrapper and give it a flex display, and also turn the direction vertically, and then give them a gap of 1 rem. So hit the purple icon and give it a gap of 1 rem. So remember when we turn this to a minimum width of 80%. Now this seems not to work, so I'm just going to click on the minimum width and then reset it. Come back and give the width 80%. Now giving it 80%, some sort of like, you can see from this part of the screen to this part of the screen, and then there's a huge space here. So what we are going to do is that we're going to click on the initial footer, which is housing the footer wrapper, turn it to a flex, and come on the x-axis and align it to the center. So you can see now this is in the center. So what we are creating is practically in the center. So for the footer wrapper, we're going to give this a background color so that we sort of like differentiate it from the white background all around it. So we're going to click on the footer wrapper and scroll all the way down to backgrounds and select our background to be alabaster. Now there's something that is a little bit weird. Now we can see that there's too much space on the left and right, and we will have to reduce something. So for us to reduce these spacings, is still on the footer wrapper. So we'll make it, instead of 80%, we'll make it 90%, and it stretches out a little bit. Now we're going to give it a top and bottom padding of 1 rem each. So click on the top padding and give it 1 rem, and click on the bottom padding as well, give it 1 rem as well. So there's some sort of breathing room on at the top. Also left and right will do the same as well. Give it a padding of 1 rem, and then on the right also give it another padding of 1 rem. So you can see it has some sort of like breathing space. But then if you notice something, that there is no demarcation between the items at the top and the middle and the bottom. So we're going to change this background color and add something else first, and scroll all the way down to background color and give it a background of baby powder instead. Now what we're gonna do is that we are going to add lines in between each of these. So what I'm gonna do is that I am going to add another div block under footer wrapper, Command E, div block. And on this div block, I'm going to drag it in between footer social and footer links. So this new div block, I'm going to name it footer line, and then I'm going to scroll all the way down to borders, give it a down border. So first of all, select down this particular one and then give it a line. Now we can see that we have a line here, and then we're going to change the line color to alabaster, and we're going to give it a width of 0.5 rem or 0.125 rem. So this makes a lot of sense. Yeah, 0.125 rem makes a whole lot of sense. And then we're going to click on the footer line again and duplicate it. Now this time, the second duplicate, we're going to drag it below the footer links. So there's a line just after the first section of the footer, and then there's a line demarcating the middle section and the last section of the footer. So what we're going to do now is that we're going to add some sort of border curve to this particular footer, and I'm going to select the footer wrapper and give it a curve of 1 rem. So when we select the footer, you can see that it has some sort of curve by the edges. So let's just click on the footer wrapper again and make it 1.5 rem. So the curve is much better and much visible. Now for the footer itself, we are going to give it a background color, and it's not just an ordinary background color. We're going to give it a gradient color. To give it a gradient color, I'm going to select the footer, and I'm going to come to where it says background and click on this icon and come over here and select the gradient icon. And now I am going to switch the colors, and now I'm going to make sure that this is set to 0 degrees. And now I'm going to switch the color. So where it says this color black, I'm just going to change it, and that's the only color I'm changing. And then you can see that there's some sort of gradient happening both left and right. Now I'm going to give this a top and bottom padding as well, and I'm going to come to spacing, select padding, and I'm going to add 2 rem at the top and 2 rem below as well. So I'm going to give it a top and bottom padding of 2 rem, so at least it's some sort of, in a way, looks like it's floating. Now I'm going to add some sort of dark shades around it so it's a little bit separated from the background. So I'm going to click on the footer wrapper, and I'm going to scroll all the way down under effects where it says box shadow, and I'm going to select that, and I'm going to give it a box shadow of 0 on the X and Y axis, and for the size I'm going to select 4, and for the blur I'm going to select 10, and I'm going to reduce the size to 1 and see how it looks like. And yeah, so you see that it has some sort of shadow going on around it. Now the shadow, it's a little bit on the Y axis, it's a little bit to the top, so I'm going to come back to footer menu, box shadow, and on the Y axis I'm going to give it a 4px, or rather make it 5 pixels. At least it goes downward, so it looks like some sort of like a card. And I'm also probably going to reduce the blur, or maybe increase the blur to 15 pixels, or rather 20 pixels, so it's way blurry. Now we're going to go forward inside the footer wrapper and add the rest of the links. So to do that, I'm going to click on the footer link. Now I'm going to go into the first div block. Remember, we have 4 div blocks within this footer links, and for each of them I'm going to add 2 div blocks. In the first div block, Command E and add a div, and this div block will be link header. That's the CSS title we're going to give it, and we're going to add another div block inside it, and this second div block is going to be the footer link. So now in the first one, which is the footer header, I'm going to add a paragraph, or instead of a paragraph I'm going to add a H3 heading, and I'm going to change the text. Double click on it and change the text. Now I'm going to edit this text, make sure that I remove the top, this margins here, and remove this one as well. Then I'm going to change the font to Inter, and I'm going to capitalize this. Click on more options and capitalize. You can see capitalization, so capitalize this, and I'm going to set it to 1 EM, and for the size I'm going to set it to 1.125 rem, and for the color I'm going to leave it at battleship gray. Also, I'm going to leave the weight at bold, that's 700. So inside this div block, I am going to first of all name this div block menu items, and I'm going to make sure that it's set to flex and it's horizontal, it's going down vertically, and then I'm going to set a gap of 1 rem between the two of them, or rather make it 0.5 rem. So for the second footer link inside, so inside this footer link div block, I am going to do Command E and add a link text. So this link text, I'm going to just connect it to this particular link that we already did in the header, and then the CSS is menu link. So I'm just going to name this menu link, and it's going to take on the whatever this at the header is, and then I'm going to add an additional CSS title of footer link, so that if I want to make any additional changes to this, it doesn't affect any of the ones at the header. So I'm just going to change this text to about. So this is going to be where the about is going to be. So I'm going to duplicate this. Also, if you notice that as I'm duplicating it, it's going vertically. So the footer link, we turn it into it's still in the block, so we turn it into a flex and make it go down vertically. So that way, when we start putting menu items, it starts going vertically. So the first one is about, and then the second one is services. So one thing that we can do here is that we can align everything to the left, and also make sure that we have a gap of 0.5 rem, so there's some sort of spacing between the links. Now duplicate another one and call it case studies, duplicate again, call it template, duplicate again and call it contact. Back to footer link, it's looking a little bit too stacked, so probably 0.5 rem doesn't really do it, so we're going to do 0.75 rem in terms of the gap, and you can see that it's expanded a little bit more. So now for the footer link, I'm going to change the background color of this. I'm going to change the color from gunmetal to battleship gray. So yeah, that's that for the first part of the first footer. So I'm going to fast forward this to add 2 more footers, and then later on I'm going to show you how to add a subscription link where people can give their emails to subscribe. All right, seeing that I've added these things to the footer links, now you can notice that there is no spacing in between these. So I'm going to click on the footer links here and give them some sort of gap, and that will be 0.5 rem. Also, I'm going to make sure that when I click on the text, you can see that this is sort of aligning to the center. Make sure that I'm going to click on this and align everything to the left, so that way it looks a little bit more like these. So now if you notice that some of the links are some sort of wrapped around this, so I'm going to change, and this is as a result of this spacing that we have on the sides. So what I'm gonna do is that I'm going to go to the footer wrapper, and I'm going to change the width from 90% to 95%. That stretches it a little bit more. So let's take a look at what we've done so far in terms of the menu. We're just going to come here and click on preview, and you can see the menu items, how they are looking here. And there's just one thing for us to add, which is the email collection, and we're going to add something to collect emails from the footer. So let's go ahead and build it it's writing. So click on this button, the design button, takes you back to where you were before, and now we have to add another div. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to duplicate one of these divs that I already have, one of the the menu item divs, and then select the last one and change it from templates to this call to action, subscribe. And then I'm going to delete the menu links. All right, so the menu links are gone, and now I have to add a paragraph to this. So I'm going to do Command E again and type paragraph and add a paragraph to it. Now it's stretching it all this a little bit, but don't worry, we're going to change all of that. And then I am going to paste in the item that I want, the text I want it to be there. Click on the same paragraph I just added, come to style selector, type paragraph 5, and I can see my paragraph, and then I select it immediately. It changes to look exactly like this particular text is looking like. So I click on the footer link, and then I Command E, and then I type form. So it has a form block, and this is what a form block looks like basically. So it comes with a name and an email address, but we're only looking to collect the email address and not the name. So we're just going to click on this and delete it. Click on the name to delete it, and then we are left with the email address and the space to type in whatever it is, and then the button. So we're going to change this button to the normal button that we've been using all along. So click on the button, make sure it's selected, and come to the style selector, search for the initial buttons that we've been using, and here it is. We're going to change the text from, double click on it and change it to subscribe. For the title, we're going to change this and just rather delete it, so people just get to put in their email here and then click on the subscribe button. So I'm going to change the size of this menu links a little bit, as it's way too big for my liking, and I'm going to make sure that I scroll all the way to the typography, make sure that I change the sizing from 1.125. First of all, disconnect this and just call it 1 rem, and then for this paragraph I'm also going to change it to 1 rem. But before I do, if I make any change to this, it's also going to change this particular paragraph and a whole host of other paragraphs as well connected to it. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to switch this, but before I do, I'm going to give it another CSS title of subscribe. And then once that is done, I can come to the size. So I'm going to disconnect this first and then change it to 1 rem, and we are going to view it again. So click this button, and then this is how it is now looking like. So we have a footer menu that is looking like a card, and it's sort of like floating with some sort of background to it. And if we scroll all the way from the top, we can see our top menu, we can see the hero section, the cards, the images, we can see the social proof, and we have some sort of like an about here, case studies, and some sort of like a service or the services that this website will offer, and then we'll have the footer. So this is more or less like a simple, building a simple website in its simplest form in Webflow. In the future, I'm going to be doing something advanced, and you will have to learn how to do some sort of like animations and make things move around with better designs. This is more or less like just without doing anything crazy and just keeping it simple, and I hope you found value in it. So all the assets, like I said, are in the description, so make sure that you have it and you use it to build. Congratulations, you made it. You've built a full homepage in Webflow. From the header all the way to the footer, you've now touched almost every section a real website needs. In the next videos, we'll start covering responsiveness, animations, and layouts. So if you want to keep improving on your skills, make sure to subscribe and check out the rest of the playlist. And if this build along was helpful to you, drop in the comments. I'd love to hear how your site is coming along together. Now, if you're still struggling with clients, check out this video where I talked about refining client processes, and also another video where I talked about how I get clients off of Instagram. So I'll see you in these videos.